Hello everybody and welcome back to Shane's Squirrel Shack where we talk about autism awareness and all of that. And as always, thank you guys so much for tuning in to another video. Every view is appreciated. Everyone hanging out in the Squirrel Shack is appreciated, is loved, so again, thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to be talking about autism and shutdowns and meltdowns or whatever you want to call it. And so I'm going to talk about my experience with it, why I think we have these shutdowns, and, what can be done to help during a shutdown versus, what someone like me can do as an autistic and what maybe others can do who are in that situation or in that environment with someone who's autistic. Granted, if there is others in that environment. So, to start off, an autistic shutdown is literally what it sounds like. You shut down, you stop working, your battery dies. The Energizer Bunny in me dies and needs to be recharged. Believe me, I can't tell you how many times I've been called the Energizer Bunny at my one job. Because I'm just a moving, fast-paced machine. And when the Energizer battery dies inside of me, I don't work. It's literally what it is, and I fail to recharge in that environment. So that might mean that I become very antisocial, withdrawn, crabby, and I might find myself seeking isolation. And I'll give you some examples of kind of what that might look like in a given situation. So I'm going to throw a couple examples of me as a kid, maybe a teenager, and then we'll talk about what I go through as an adult autistic with my shutdowns, because they still happen. As much, again, as I like to get in front of the camera and say, here's what I've been able to accomplish and overcome and try and help you guys and give you guys, a perspective on what you guys can do. But I'm autistic. That's how I'm wired. I can't remove it. So what can we do to the best ability to understand it and best work with it in the situation given? So anyways, I'm gonna rewind. There's that little speech flip to when I was about 2 or 3 years old, right around my diagnosis time. So I had this little thing where I would have to line up VCR tapes right next to each other, perfectly next to each other. It had to be a perfect straight line. And I hope most of you guys know what a VCR is. Otherwise, I hope high school's going well for you guys. So, if my mother would move the VCR just a little bit, I would shut down. I would jump. I would scream. I would cry. I would literally throw a tantrum on steroids. And it would take forever to calm me down. And I remember a lot of those tantrums. I remember when I was a kid, I would cry almost every day until I was 9 when something was thrown off a little bit or when I didn't get my way. And granted, kids don't get their way most of the time and then they have their little tantrums. I hear it in grocery stores when they're like, "Mommy, I want this! Why can't I get this?" No, son, no, daughter, whatever. And you just hear the screams echo through the room. And you're just kind of like, oh my God. I know I was so much worse, It could have been me as the 3-year-old in that store. And God, what if, I think of the people who might have seen, me break down in public and, the underpaid cashiers at a grocery store when I would go in and shut down in a public setting like that. Oh my God, that kid, parents gotta get his act together. And sometimes I think that when I'm in my retail setting, and then I have to realize that there are some cases where it might have been very similar to mine. But anyways, speaking of grocery stores, as I got a little older and when I was expected to go into a grocery store, get a couple items from mom while she's sitting in the car, I wouldn't be able to do it. Granted, socializing when I was 10 years old, 11 at this time, was awful. It was awful. So when I was thrown into that social situation out of a routine, out of my comfort zone where I did not understand the task, the environment at all, and there was so much uncertainty and so many things unclear, I would just run out of the store. I would be crying. I would flinch. I just stopped. I just stopped working. And something that helped me overcome that, I was so fortunate in this case. I had a teacher in middle school who he was a godsend. He was amazing. And, we worked around it with our IEP where we would go to a grocery store during like one of my classes, and he had like time. We would go to a grocery store and buy candy for the concession stand at the basketball games or softball games, whatever it was. So he would give me a list. Shane, go find these items. They'd be like M&M's, Snickers, Reese's, just basic concession candies. And I got more comfortable with it as I took baby steps, and I kind of got into that understanding that, there was really little to no way out of this, especially around a teacher. I'm like, okay, I'm kind of forced to do this, And so it was when I was forced to do those kind of things in small steps that helped. And that's kind of something that and I'll talk about that in a second. I'm not going to get ahead of myself. But I eventually overcame that, and again, I don't know if I said it in this video or in my last take, as much as I like to get in front of the camera and say, look at all this stuff I've worked on, I still have a lot to do. So let's go into the present day. So what are some things that shut me down to this day? And it's when maybe I'm in a social situation that's way over my head, when I'm in work and, the routine changes, the schedule changes. And a couple examples of that was a couple of years ago, I was at this cosplay convention, this anime cosplay kind of convention. And, I was with a group of people, and we got a hotel room, and this convention was much larger than I had thought. It was like you were like in like touching shoulder to shoulder with thousands of people in a room or a hallway or whatever setting it was in this environment. I would just shut down. I just stopped working. I was like, I don't know, even as a 22-year-old, how to function in this environment. What's expected of me? It's when that unclear expectation enters the setting, enters the situation, where you're not sure how to go about it. When an autistic faces uncertainty, that triggers a meltdown. And I think that's the key right there, is that uncertainty. Is because there is that gap between what most people do and what an autistic thinks they're supposed to do or doesn't understand. And when there's that uncertainty of how do I function with this change or what's present in front of me is what triggers it. And so I'm at this anime convention, and again, it's packed and it's stacked. I'm like, oh my God, I don't know. I did not know it was going to be like this. I did not know we're actually going to be here instead of, in this more low-key environment. I'm like, oh God. And so we're in this room. We got hundreds of people in, there's a speech going on from like an anime actress. And then after the fact, we go, or like voice actress, we go and we get this book signed from this video game we all played at the time, Catherine Full Body. Fantastic video game, one of my favorites. And we met one of the voice actresses, and I had my friend's book, that she wanted signed. And I accidentally put my name on it instead of theirs or whatever, and it's like, oh no. And they saw that, and they got really mad at me. I thought they did, and that just made it even worse, because I got up there, I was already in a socially awkward shutdown mood, and I had then already pissed my friend off. I was a mess those next couple days. Most of that next day I spent in the hotel room in bed, just overwhelmed, trying to recover from that shutdown, and I couldn't. And then I get a text, and my friend is like, yo, we just signed you up for the competitive Super Smash Bros. Ultimate tournament. You gotta be there in 15 minutes. And I'm in bed. I'm like, you've gotta be shitting me. And so here I roll up to this tournament in my sweats, like late to the game. I somehow kick this dude's ass. I kick this dude's ass, and he's pissed at me. He's like, he rolls up 10 minutes late before he got, disqualified, and he kicks my ass. Long story short, somehow I ended up in the top half in this tournament. I don't know how at all. But that was that. And then I went back down into shutdown mode. And then I wanted to hide and resort into a state of isolation again. And I just waited until we all were able to leave that next day. And it was draining. It is so draining, man. It's exhausting. It's exhausting to have an autism shutdown. And another one I had recently, and I think I might have touched up on this in my midnight special video not too long ago. But when my routine my schedule, is suddenly changed at work, where I'm like, oh, I was scheduled to work until 3:30. And my boss is like, no, did you see the update yesterday? You're here till 6 now. I'm like, so it's cool that you can just change my schedule last minute? No, that ain't gonna fly with me. And that's been happening more and more at this place, to where I'm actually now gonna be leaving, because I'm like, this is not working with how I work. And it's not worth it. And I know there's better opportunities that I can venture out into. So, but it's like that, or I'm, again, assigned to a different department or given a different shift time. And I'm like, this wasn't what I was expecting. And I shut down. Or when we have a game plan and that is completely abandoned by like management or whoever's running a shift. Now, granted, a lot of these, most people could be pissed off on, whether you're autistic or not. But as an autistic, it's a little more extreme. So like when I'm at work and I have a shutdown when maybe we're busier than expected, or when I'm supposed to do a new task that I wasn't expecting on doing. It's like I black out, like I'm blackout drunk. I don't drink, and I don't condone any of that. But it's like you black out, you forget how to function, you forget everything, your mind blanks, you forget essentially, except you're not drunk. All right? It's like, damn. Like, I feel this, but not drunk. This sucks. But man, like, so with all of that said, what could be done to help in that situation? And I say, bring yourself back to a state of familiarity. Again, a shutdown is when you are in a state of uncertainty. So bring yourself back into that state of familiarity. And hopefully you're fortunate to be in a situation where you're able to escape for a little bit and find some familiarity. For me, that's recognizing my heart rate. Like, find your pulse, find your heart rate, find your breath. Look around you, find what the time is. Think about where you're at. Think about the situation now. What is certain? Because what was once certain isn't gonna happen. So when you put that perspective in is, what is the new certain? And you go about things after that, at least for me, things are a lot more manageable. It's a lot more manageable. Once you go into that mindset of, okay, what is the new certainty? What is the new given? Then things can become a little easier, at least for me. And I get everyone who's on the autism spectrum responds differently. I'm just a guy trying to share my perspective and potential advice that anyone, autistic or not, can take. Now, I want to talk about how we can have better conversations when someone who's autistic is having a shutdown. Because we can't change the result unless we change the conversation. So with that, if you're at a work setting, tell your management, tell your boss that I am autistic. As much anxiety as that can be, and I talked about that in a previous video, it can help. It protects you. They can't really say too much against it when you're like, this is because of a disability. Unless they're shitty ass management, they really shouldn't challenge you too much on that. And the conversation, how we can have that conversation is what can bring you back to that state of certainty, that state of familiarity. And that's how we should have these conversations. What's going on? Why are you experiencing this? What in this environment is bringing you to this state of mind? And what can we do to help, bring you back to that state of certainty? Do you need a few minutes? Do you need to breathe? Do you need water? Do you need to walk around for a bit? Do you need to find your pulse or whatever? Whatever that might look like depending on who's talking to you. If you're in a social situation with friends and you have a shutdown, how can we have that conversation with friends when, hey, I'm having an autism shutdown? Help. something, I mean, I've done it before where I've had to leave the environment and people are like, what's wrong? What are you doing? And at the time, I didn't know how to explain it to them. But now it's like, hey, I'm struggling right now, man. I'm struggling. This is happening. This is why it's happening. This is why I'm in the mental place I am where I'm at right now. And ultimately, man, it comes down to compassion. It comes down to hopefully, being around the right people. And it's just like, what can I do to help? What can I do to help you, bring you back to that state of familiarity? Do you need do you need to breathe for a bit? Do you want me around? Do you want to talk it out? Do you want me to, how can I get a better understanding? So those are just question points. Those are just conversation points right there that could help get an autistic out of that shutdown, meltdown mode. And not only does it do that, it helps those who are not autistic understand an autistic better. So when that person or another autistic that they come face to face with has that shutdown, they can be a better resource to that autistic. And we have better outcomes when we have better conversations and better resources. And I hope that's something you guys can carry out after this video, which I'm going to end and leave off right now. Again, thank you so much for tuning in to Shane's Squirrel Shack. And we hope that you're back. Thank you so much.